Hey, it's Two Geek Soup. I'm really glad to be here today with Josh Lindsay of the Movie Proposal podcast. This is super exciting. I have been listening to you guys for how long have you been doing the show? It's been 3 or 4 years now, right?
Oh no, 6.5 years.
Wow, it's been that long on the Movie Proposal? That's crazy.
Yeah, but we only do 2 episodes a month, so it probably only feels like 3.
If we mashed it all together into a weekly thing, it would be 3 years, maybe.
There you go.
All right. Well, man, I'm so glad to have you here. I know this is a little bit of an ad hoc thing because because I saw you, or I heard you talk to Sky about maybe wanting to cover The Flash, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and he seemed less than enthused about it. So I said, "Hey, don't worry about that old curmudgeon. Let's talk about it and actually have some fun."
No, that's a great idea, and you're right. He is not going to see it, but it will be discussed in our podcast. I'm going to bring a guest from Big Idea, a friend of mine who's going to talk about it. But this will be
fantastic.
good. I'm glad we're talking about it because I just saw it 2 nights ago.
Cool. Well, you can warm up with me, and then your show will be really good.
Well, don't do that. Of course, they're both going to be great.
All right. Well, I always like to start out the show when I have a new friend on and talk a little bit about what sort of geeky stuff are you into, and what was your gateway drug into geek culture?
Well, in terms of, I guess I'll start as a kid. I loved movies as a kid. I wanted to make movies. I think it was when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's my all-time favorite. So I get geeky over
Solid.
Indiana Jones for sure. When I was a kid, you had VHS tapes, which you had to, rewind, and maybe you could rent. And if you were lucky, you copied it or you bought it as a gift, but they were expensive, and
taped it off a TV.
Right, exactly. And when I would go to my grandmother's, it was, I think, the choices we had to watch was Wizard of Oz and then maybe Raiders or Star Wars, one of those two. But Indiana Jones I was totally geeked about that. Of course, Star Wars, I wore out VHS tapes watching that. I remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the theater and coming actually to my grandmother's house and just could not shut up about it.
Yeah.
But then also Michael Keaton's Batman, that I remember sitting very vividly in the theater, the opening credits with Danny Elfman's music, and the camera's tracking along this. It looks like a cave, but eventually it pulls out and it's the bat symbol. And
yeah, that's right.
It was so cool. I got the Jack Nicholson Joker stand up cut out, full size. I had that for years and I used it to scare people. I eventually got thrown away because I scared my children with it. My wife's like, "We're done." It's going away. But I had the posters, and back then Warner Brothers had a catalog. Like when you would get catalogs in the mail and you could order Warner Brothers stuff, the bat symbol pins and T-shirts and posters and the Joker paraphernalia type stuff. And so I was definitely geeked out from those 3, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and then, I can't forget Superman. So I guess I'll just say DC Comics in general. But
okay. So have you been into the comics as well, or were you more just sort of in the movie?
No.
Sphere of it.
Only movies. The only comics I ever got into was Gru. Have you ever heard of Gru?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I can't even believe I haven't thought of Gru in decades until you just asked me about comic books. So he was this fat warrior who loved cheese dip, I think it was, and he was an idiot and clumsy, but he always saved the day somehow. So it was a funny comic. But that was the only one I was ever into. I may have a Batman or a Superman comic just because I saw it and it was cool, but I never really read them. It was just the movies.
Right. Okay. So you're a movie geek mostly.
Oh, yeah, big time. there's only a few films that I would not watch, or a genre or two that don't interest me, but movies across the board interest me.
Yeah. So when you watch a movie, are you looking at like a lot of the kind of more of the technical stuff, or are you more into like the narrative part of it? Like what really like energizes you and like captures your imagination about like movies, like cinema as an art form?
Well, hopefully the story and the characters are engaging, that I'm not actively thinking about technical things. If I'm thinking about technical things, it's usually because the story is boring, the characters aren't interesting, and so I'm trying to find something to grab my attention. But it's easier with, or I should say this, with a film that the expectations are high, like Indiana Jones is coming out.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to not be critical of
Well,
everything.
it sounds like if your expectations are high for this one, you're setting yourself up for some disappointment. I'm not.
Yeah. And so
I'm not hearing a lot of early buzz that is that's encouraging on that score.
Agreed. And so naturally I try and temper my expectations, but it's hard when he was your hero as a kid, and you just love the films, and you just want it to be good. And I walked out of Crystal Skull, and I remember thinking, wait, was that bad? No. There's no way that could be bad.
Right.
Was that a bad? I think that might have been bad. Like you're just such in denial.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie The Flash that we're going to talk about, I was looking at a lot of the technical stuff because I kind of got bored.
Okay.
But I try, and my hope is that the movie will be engaging enough that you don't care about the technical stuff, and then a second or third viewing is when you get more into it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just know that some people, that's just the way that they love to engage with movies, is to really like focus in on like, oh, this, focus pull shot here, or the framing of that, or the blocking, and that's like all of the technical jargon that I can pull out of my butt.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, the answer would be yes to that, but hopefully it's later when you have another, just a film like Memento, where Christopher Nolan's early film.
Sure.
That one you watch again and again, and you just pick up different things you didn't notice, patterns or camera angles or things like that. But again, if I'm getting too technical, it's because I'm bored.
Okay, fair enough.
At least in the first viewing.
Yeah. All right, well, then let's go ahead and just get right into The Flash. So another thing that I like to do is bring in some comics lore when we're talking about a comic book movie.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how familiar you are with, you just told me already you haven't been really a comic book guy per se. But this movie draws heavily from a story arc in the Flash comics called Flashpoint.
Okay.
And it essentially is it's basically like the sort of the broad strokes of the plot of the movie is, the Flash goes back in time to try and save, his mom from dying. And in doing so, he wrecks the timeline. And so when he comes back, like, everything is different. The Atlanteans and Wonder Woman's people on Themyscira are at war. Thomas Wayne did not die, and he became Batman instead.
Oh, okay.
Of Bruce. He did... I can't remember why, but he did also lose his powers, and he had to recreate the accident that gave him his powers again. It also did not work the first time, and if I remember correctly, he had to do it like multiple times, and like by the time it worked, he was just like a burned, like, horrible mess, and it was like the last desperation, and if it didn't work, then he was gonna die. because it didn't have the healing, powers that come from being connected to the Speed Force. And and I kind of forget how that one resolved. I don't remember how that.
Do you remember if it went back to
the comics?
Do you remember if it went back to the original storyline, or were things going forward forever different?
I think things were a little bit different because DC does this like Marvel doesn't do it. Marvel does it in a little bit different way. DC will have this like huge like universe altering sort of continuity shakeup like every 4 or 5 years or so, like starting back on Crisis on Infinite Earths back in like 1980. I don't know what the actual year is. Sometime back in the 80s, there was this event called Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that sort of like that was supposed to like unify the DC multiverse because it was getting so complicated, because there was the Justice Society was on Earth 2, and then there were all these other weird things, and like nobody could really understand like how these characters were supposed to be interacting and which one was where and all of that stuff. So Crisis on Infinite Earths was supposed to bring it all together and make it more cohesive, and that worked for a little while, and then it sort of got crazy again, and then there was a little while later there was this thing called 0 Hour, and then there was more ever increasing crises of all sorts of different kinds, and then Flashpoint was another thing that happened along here, probably about 12 to 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. Maybe more like 10 years ago. But Marvel does it in a little bit different way. Marvel has like a sliding timeline. So like in the comics at any given point, Spider-Man has been around, for about 10 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. And the Avengers have been around for about 15 years. And the Fantastic Four have been around for about 15 years. And so that's why you always get these subtle retcons in the comics of like, Iron Man was originally born out of the Vietnam War.
Oh.
And in more recent comics, it's like, oh no, it was actually, Afghanistan. And the same with the Punisher. He was a Vietnam War vet. Oh no, now he's like an Iraq War vet. Oh no, now he's actually like an Afghanistan war in the Middle East vet. And so on.
Similar story, just they just kind of update the timeline based on the audience and their age.
Basically, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so that was Flashpoint, and like obviously there are a lot of those story beats are similar and present here in the Flash movie. So give me your just like quick what was your impression of the movie? Did you like it? Like what were your feelings coming out of seeing the Flash?
So I guess the short answer is no, but there are things that I really enjoyed about it. There were things that made me scratch my head. There were things I just thought were terrible. I can't even believe how bad some of the things were in there. And there were some things that I thought were just fun and enjoyable. I think the problem I had going into it was I didn't really care about Flash as a character.
Okay.
And I think the actor, is it Ezra? What's his name?
Yeah, Ezra Miller. Yeah.
Just his...
I don't really like to use the word problematic, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it affected, it tainted my view, for sure. I didn't think he was that funny in past films, and he's supposed to be funny. He's a little annoying, and they know he's annoying, but that doesn't make him endearing, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's just kind of weird and twitchy, right?
Right, and they get that, and they kind of poke fun of it in the movie. But usually when they poke fun of it, it's kind of like, well, but we love him anyway, right? And you're like, well, I don't.
Yeah, do we? Yeah.
Right. So, my general take of comparing Marvel to DC is I'm diehard Batman, Superman fan. I thought all the Marvel characters, with the exception of Spider-Man, were just stupid, like, and copycats of DC. But then when the movie started coming out, they were so good, and you started caring about the individual characters, and then they started coming together, and it was just this big ramp up. Where when DC did this, Snyder stuff, Snyderverse type stuff.
Yeah.
And, they're throwing characters in that you didn't know or that you didn't care about. The most recent example, I think, is Black Adam, where all of a sudden you got Atom Man and Hawkman and some smart guy. I remember them kind of from the Justice League as a kid, but
yeah,
I don't care about these characters. Who are these people? And it's supposed to be kind of a fun, like, oh, look who it is, cool, but it wasn't. And
right.
And so there was some of that in The Flash. My only real interest in seeing The Flash was Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of him. I'm a big fan of Michael Keaton, period. But I was a big fan of his Batman. Right. And the fact that he agreed to do this said, or made me say, this might be promising.
Right.
I thought his role was probably the best part of the movie. Just only because it was pure nostalgia and it was fun to see him back in action,
yeah, like I thought that was a lot of fun, and also it gave rise to some of the moments of fan service in the movie that made me groan the most.
Right.
Like, why do we need to say, do you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Like, that's a weird thing to shoehorn into a script.
Yes.
And also, like, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like I remember that was actually like an improvised line in the Batman movie.
Oh, the original one?
Yeah. But, like, you're going to have the Batwing, like, silhouetted against the moon again. Like, you're going to, do the like, having him say, I'm Batman, like, okay, like, that fits. That's fine, because, the Flash is looking for a different guy to be Batman. But, like, also, I didn't really understand why this Batman would understand, like, temporal mechanics.
Oh.
And be able to explain to the Flash, like, how time works. Like, this seems to be a relatively, like, this world that has branched off, like, seems to be like a relatively, like, low fantastic world. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like there were a whole lot of other heroes and like all sorts of, like, crazy super science going on in this world. Like, does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I imagine it would just make it more complicated. They just needed a moment where time travel in this world was explained to the audience, and
right,
Batman is the mentor, the older, wiser, Obi-Wan type character that comes in and explains stuff to them,
right,
so that the audience can understand. And so I understand why they did it. Now, how Batman would know these things, to be honest, doesn't make any sense. I don't really care. I mean, he's sitting around by himself doing nothing. Maybe he's reading about time travel. I don't know.
Sure. So, yeah. He's got a lot of time to, like, read Stephen Hawking or something.
Right.
Fine.
So he's a smart guy. He has no friends or family. Sure. He knows something about time travel.
Because obviously that's what you do when you're old and lonely.
Right.
You learn about quantum physics.
Exactly.
So you mentioned. So what were some of the things that made you, like, scratch your head? You mentioned. I'm curious.
Scratch my head. So Well, actually, I might be able to. I'm trying to remember. Let me start with what I liked.
Yeah, go
this
for it.
This will lead to head scratching stuff probably.
Okay.
I saw it in a theater. It's a Regal theater. Regal's a branch.
Yeah.
They have movie chain. So and they have RPX, which is basically big screen loudspeakers. So when the Flash would run really fast, you felt it in your chest. And
Oh, cool.
I thought the visuals for that were cool. The sound was cool. Feeling it in that theater was cool. I was taken back thinking, wow, this is fun. Like, this is a ride.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that aspect of it. Like I said, I enjoyed the Michael Keaton stuff. Let me think. Head scratching stuff. I guess maybe I'll just jump to the stuff I didn't like.
Sure.
Well, I guess head scratching. Here's something. The CGI was so bad. And
some of it was, yeah.
With the people, that's what made my head. I thought, why? What's going on here? So, just to give some context, in case someone hasn't seen the film, or just a reminder that when he is, and I don't know what it's called, but when he's going so fast, he can like pick time loops to jump into. I guess what's that called when he's in that sphere?
Yeah, I don't know if that really has a name per se. It's just like, it's understood that like he runs like faster than the speed of light, and so it's like a function of the speed force, like blah 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 comic book nonsense.
Yeah. So in the when he's viewing time, and he can kind of speed it up or turn it back, and he's looking at his own history, and let's say he's looking at his dad. The actor was clearly created in CGI, and you're thinking, well, you have the actor. Why wouldn't you have just shot this scene with the actor? And then later, when you see these worlds colliding, and you're seeing Christopher Reeve's Superman and Nicolas Cage's Superman, they couldn't have those guys. Well, I guess you could do Nicolas Cage, but he wouldn't. You needed a young Nicolas Cage, right? And you needed to do Christopher. So those had to be CGI. And my only thought is, that's the best CGI they could come up with, which was not good. And so we're just going to match, everyone else in this time thing, so it looks like it was done on purpose.
Right.
Which was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Although, like, I will say, like, as somebody who knows a little bit about about that aborted Nicolas Cage Superman movie, I loved that moment. Like, the CG was not great, but like bringing that in, I thought was a really fun moment for me.
And so I don't have a problem with nostalgia, and I am familiar with Tim Burton's idea for Nicolas Cage, and I've watched some of the videos on that. That idea of making Nicolas Cage Superman never made sense to me.
It was insane. It was absolutely bonkers. But like, to actually have that in a movie was super entertaining to me.
Yes, no, I agree. Like, they thought, this is never going to happen. Let's just do it because we can get away with it here. So I get why they did that. I'll give you that. It was fun, but boy, the CGI was bad, and I just didn't understand why they. I mean, I guess, is that, I've seen better CGI. I don't. Is that?
Yeah.
Did you think it was like they ran out of time, or what was your thought?
Boy, that's a good question. It's always hard to evaluate for me some of that stuff here in the last few years because things were so turbulent with COVID and I think this movie also had some production hiccups, just with all the shakeups that were going on at Warner Brothers, and so I don't know, like so there's that on one hand, but also, and this isn't like original to me, like I saw somebody else say this, like there's no excuse for making bad CGI. because Jurassic Park was made in 1994.
Sure, yeah, right.
and that still holds way up. Like that is brilliant, and it works, and like you can watch that today and feel like that Tyrannosaur is really about to eat that Jeep.
Right.
You know.
But the only thing is, and I don't know, I assume they'll figure this out, but this now we're into the idea of the uncanny valley, where we're looking at Christopher Reeve. We all know he's not alive, and we all know that's not him. And so our brains are like, this, something's not right. And you can't put your finger on it, but you know it doesn't look real. Like when they did in Rogue One, where they had...
Oh my gosh. So bad.
Right. And
so bad. Yeah, Tarkin, and even worse, the Leia was even worse than Tarkin.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that I hate that that's the last frame of that movie, because it took me out of the movie so hard when she turned around and it was this weird plastic fake Leia face. I did not like that at all.
Right.
But also there's no excuse for that, because like the young Michael Douglas and young Michelle Pfeiffer in Ant-Man and the Wasp was brilliant and amazing.
Oh, right. Yeah. And they did that with Kurt Russell and Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah. It's been done well.
Right.
Like, there's no excuse for it to look even worse than Patrick Stewart did in Dark Phoenix.
Oh, I'm not sure I saw that. I think I saw that one.
Oh, sorry, no, not Dark Phoenix. The Last Stand.
Oh, okay. So
because they did a back in time, make Patrick Stewart look young in X-Men Last Stand, and it was also very bad.
But in defense of all those movies that we just listed, compared to The Flash, I think all of those had a reason, like it was part of the story. It at least made sense those characters were there, and they were part of moving the story forward, where in The Flash, you saw Christopher Reeve, you're like, oh, look, it's Superman, Supergirl from way back when. They didn't do anything except stand there. Same thing with Nicolas Cage, same thing with the guy from the black and white TV show, Superman, where it was pure nostalgia of, oh, we can see them. And Nicolas Cage was cool to see, kind of floating like, oh, this is what it might look like. But they didn't do anything. It didn't move the story forward. And that, I think, beyond the bad CGI, was the biggest, I don't know, letdown or mistake or whatever that, boo. Like, you got to do better. Like, don't use it. I don't know. Like, it's just like you think you just put a picture of Christopher Reeve in there and everyone's going to think this movie's great. Like, well, no, we're not. We're smarter than that.
So to what extent do you feel is this a just sort of like continuing the foibles and follies of DC's movie projects over the last 10 years?
Well, I read an article. I like Screen Rant, and they had like the top 15 reasons why this was a bomb, and so there's a lot. Yeah,
because it is bombing. It only made $55 million on its first weekend.
Yeah,
and that's not gonna be good, for their outlook on stuff.
And I think it's getting better reviews than Indiana Jones is, but still, it's
seems like that's a pretty low bar. But okay,
right. But I don't. There were again. This movie was discussed back in 2014. It was going to be like the first multiverse, with nostalgia, bring back character type thing. By the time this movie came out, you've had the Spider-Man movie with all the Spider-Men in them. You've had Doctor Strange multiverse. We've had Ant-Man multiverse. You've had Spider-Verse, the animated one.
Right.
And then The Flash comes out and we're like, yeah. We've seen all this stuff. This is what everybody's doing. We get it. So that was kind of a blow against it. Again, I think Ezra Miller is unfortunately a big reason why, the character, people just aren't... Like, people love Tom Holland as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He's a likable, lovable guy, character, all those things. So fun. So fun.
Yeah.
Flash, not so much.
Well, and I think they probably made a huge mistake just from the outset, not letting Grant Gustin, the guy from the TV show, just be the Flash, because I don't know. Have you seen the Flash TV show at all?
Clips, yeah, not a full episode.
Okay, because he's great. Like he's just way more. I don't know, like a real person, and not like a crazy twitchy like like caricature of a person, the way that Ezra Miller plays him. And like the fans of that show are legion, and
I'm sure there's some kind of metrics where they look at how many people watch that show. How many people compared to how many people would potentially come to the movie and care about the show, and they're weighing that. And then there's there is I don't know how you put your finger on it, but when it comes to casting, there are people, and it's different now because we have streaming. But if you go back a few years before we had streaming, there are the actors that these were movie stars, and then there were actors these are television stars, and the idea that a movie star would ever be in a TV series was no, that would never happen, right? I mean, they're a tier above, and that would be a step down. Maybe a TV star could go up to a movie star, but there was a difference, and I feel like that's what they looked at with the Flash. I'm guessing is that what's his name, Grant? Is that his name?
Yeah, Grant Gustin. But I feel like that has changed over the last decade or so as well. Because you've had major movie stars go and do TV shows, like Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, like even earlier. Well, and maybe it's kind of like, maybe it is still sort of a step down for a guy like, like Chris O'Donnell was maybe a little bit washed up when he went to NCIS, LA. But
think of because of streaming and because the writing is better. Like, movies are mostly sequels and cartoons and superhero films, and streaming is where you get the drama. So a lot of really good movie actors are willing to do streaming now. But I'm trying to think of how many television stars are big movie stars.
Movie stars.
The guy from John Hamm from Mad Men. He was.
Yeah, sure.
Now he's not a huge movie draw, but he's in movies. So there's there's that breakthrough where you can get into movies, but you're not going to be built like Matthew McConaughey, like you just said, like you're starting in a film, actually, a good example. Here we go. Woody Harrelson. He would be an exception.
Sure.
But he's the exception, not the rule, sort of thing. And so I think
I
Grant
guess that's true.
Is. I mean, if I was casting, I'd be like, not even watched the show, just seeing clips of him, I would have a real problem casting him as the Flash in a movie. Just because there's not that gravitas. Where at least Ezra Miller carries something. I don't think it worked. It was like, well, too bad. But he for some reason he was weightier. I don't know. I don't know how you put your finger on that.
Yeah. Well, so I think that what this movie was trying to do, at least in terms of the overall architecture of what DC is doing in their movies, is to give us a way to break out of what has been, and really push forward into what oh, come on, I had his name just a second ago and now I've lost it. The guy who's in charge of Gunn, and push into what James Gunn is going to start doing with the DC movies now, and hopefully have a little bit more of a unified vision and consistent through lines to tie these movies together. Because I feel like that's been a weakness of the DC movies up till this point, because you had them being sort of overseen generally by Scott Snyder, who just doesn't understand superheroes really, I think.
I'm sorry, who's Scott Snyder?
Isn't that it's not is that not his name? The guy who directed the Superman movies and the No, it's not Scott. What is it?
Oh, you just threw me for a loop. I'll have to look. I do this all the time on my podcast. We're idiots on the podcast. We don't look up anything. I'll look it up.
Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder.
There you go. Okay.
Scott Snyder is somebody else. Scott Snyder, I think, is a comic book writer, and that's why I'm
perfectly understandable mistake.
Mixing that up. Yeah, he's a comic book writer.
Okay.
But yeah, Zack Snyder just didn't get, like, he's on record, like he said, like, fairly early on, like, I don't understand why people like Superman.
Really?
And then DC is like, oh, okay, great. Why don't you be in charge of everything pertaining to Superman in our movies? This is going to work out fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we get, like, mopey emo Superman, which is not
right.
Henry Cavill's fault. I think he did, the best that he could. But, like, we're dealing with a guy who literally, doesn't get this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think James Gunn is a better candidate for sort of overseeing the whole enterprise, and we'll see how that goes. They're kind of swinging for the fences on the DC movies that are coming out here in the next 5 years or so. I don't know. Did you follow any of that?
I did. Yeah, I mean, they've got Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
I'm losing track. I know there's... How many Batman movies are coming out? There's the Robert Pattinson. Isn't there a James Gunn one coming out as well?
They are doing a sequel to the Batman. Yeah. Hold on, let me pull this up.
But that's called like other worlds.
Elseworlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not part of the universe necessarily. But this is the mistake Universal made with their MonsterVerse, where they casted all their movies. They said, these are the movies we're making, expect one every year, whatever. And when they announced it, it sounded like, oh, cool. Look who's in, Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe, all these people are like, this will be good. And The Mummy, I didn't see it, and it was terrible, and they had to scrap the whole thing. And you think, gee,
right.
Why did you have to announce all that up front? But they're doing that with DC, which when I was a kid, a movie like Indiana Jones would come out, or Star Wars, or like Return of the Jedi, or Empire Strikes Back, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd wait 3 or 4 years before anything related to that came out, and you'd have 3 or 4 years of just different movies.
Yeah.
Where now you are getting multiple of the same genre and being rebooted within a couple years, and you're like, holy cow! I mean, I guess there's an audience for this, but it'd be nice to have a break and just have something different, to cleanse the palate, maybe.
Yeah, and I know you guys have talked on your show a lot about this sort of fatigue that's starting to set in with all of these, or I don't know if it's fatigue because they're still making lots and lots of money, but at least you and Sky are very done with all of these big movie franchises, and just, it'd be great if we had some actual originality and stuff. But, like, as Sky is fond of mentioning, like, there are huge, economic incentives
right.
to just, like, continuing to milk the formula, and there's no incentive literally to do anything other than what continues to make $1 billion every time
right.
we do it.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I think we've trashed this a lot. Are there?
Did you like the film? What did you think, John?
I had fun. I'm not a fan of Ezra Miller. I don't really love the characterization that he brought to it. I feel like he is steering more into the weirdness than he did in either of the other appearances that he made as the Flash. I guess it's really just the one. He was kind of just in Justice League, really. He was in Batman vs Superman very briefly. Which I'm puzzled that they didn't tie in to this, because anyway, that doesn't matter. That's a whole other thing, and the less said about Batman vs Superman, the better, mostly. But yeah, it was fun. There was a lot that I enjoyed about it. Just in terms of I like you, I loved to see Michael Keaton again as Batman. I think overall I'd have to kind of just give it a meh. Like, which in terms of the DC movies is actually on the higher end for me.
Okay.
Because like I actively dislike, Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
I'm pretty ambivalent about Man of Steel because of reasons that I've said on this show a lot and don't need to rehash again. The Wonder Woman movies are fine. I like Wonder Woman 84, I think, more than most people do.
Okay.
I'm planning to have a conversation about that also, because I did one about the first Wonder Woman and I'd like to follow up on it. But Aquaman, literally the first time I tried to watch Aquaman, I turned it off halfway through because I was so bored.
Yeah.
And my wife finished watching it, and I went to her later and I was like, okay, so did this and this and this happen at the end? And she was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I get it. I don't need to watch this now.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall it just kind of, it didn't thrill me as an entire package. But I would like to see if we can we tease out some themes from this. Like, what is this movie like? It's obviously it's pretty flawed, but what's it getting at? Like, is it trying to say anything that we can kind of grab onto and like tease something productive or useful or encouraging out of?
Are you like talking about like in terms of like themes from the film?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, and actually, I would say this was a positive for the film. The message of the movie came from Flash's mother, which was there are some problems you just can't solve, and you just have to learn to live with it. Yeah. Which became, where he became the bad guy because he refused to give up trying to find a solution to save his mother, when reality is like sometimes you just can't do that, which is refreshing because how many people who've died in Star Wars have come back, and even in Marvel movies, that have died and come back, and you begin to really, dying is not that big of a deal anymore.
Yeah.
Where in here they actually said, no, she died and there's nothing you can do about it. And we have to learn to accept that. So I appreciated that as a theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of a quote from, I don't know how much into Star Trek you are, but there was something that was said. I think it was on the new Picard show, is when he said, "It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life."
Yeah, that's good.
And yeah, like this idea that like we are not ultimately, the master of our own destiny in like the ultimate sense. Like there's stuff that's gonna happen that we just have to deal with, and maturity is not like wallowing in the sadness of your mistakes or and I don't want to be unsensitive to people who have like actually gone through like real trauma and like have repercussions from that they have to deal with. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, just sort of like in the general flow of life, like things happen to us that we don't like.
Right.
And maturity is like not like getting mad at the world because things didn't go my way. And it's also not like giving in to the idea that, I must be just like an awful loser and why can't I do anything right? And just like, kind of dusting yourself off and continuing to move on and learn from it. Like, what can you get out of that experience that will make you better equipped for the next time something goes wrong?
I think that was a good theme. I appreciated that. Something else that jumped out to me was you mentioned maturity, like, being mature, and his character was decidedly immature.
Yeah.
And what I thought was a cool thing that unfortunately didn't work was when he met himself and he saw how annoying he really is. He even said, like, I get what people are saying this to me. Like, you need to shape up, which I thought was great. We already mentioned this, though. His annoyingness is not endearing. Like, we just,
right.
We didn't like him. And had we liked the character, and the actor, maybe it would have worked, because that's a fun idea that you get a chance to see your flaws, and be disgusted by it and say, you've got to change this, when he's speaking about himself, right? And he's growing up. He's growing up because he's actually seeing how annoying he is, and he does change in that regard and becoming a little more mature.
Yeah,
but it just didn't fly. So
yeah. And as an idea, like, that's super resonant to me, because like I had an experience several years ago. My kid who's 13 now, and he was probably like 8 or so at the time. He would carry around his Kindle and like just video things a lot. And at one point, I had asked him to do something, and he got distracted. He wasn't doing it. He was just sort of in his own little world, like, sort of doing one of these little videos. And I saw him, and he wasn't doing what I had asked, and I was harsher with him than I needed to be, and much later, it was probably a couple of years later, probably, I happened across that video clip, and I was able to hear myself from his perspective, and sense like how intrusive that harshness, that unneeded harshness was at that time. And and like, it's not, and it didn't make everything better automatically. Like, I didn't like stop doing that, unfortunately, right. Like on the spot, but at least it made me aware of it, and I was able to see myself, from the outside a little bit. And I think that's something that we don't often really get to do.
Right.
And it made me so much more aware of how that can feel, to my kid when I'm impatient, so yeah, like that's a, like, being able to see yourself from the outside is super important and can be, so helpful.
One interesting thing though about his character though, like a lot of stories, you start in a place, you go on an adventure, and you just circle back, and the story ends where the story began. But what changed is the person.
Right.
So with the Flash, he started out. He was immediately complaining to Alfred, "I'm just the garbage man for the Justice League," and
Right.
wah, 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 you know, and so they're highlighting him being annoying, and then circle back and it ends where it began. But he's changed.
Yeah.
However,
also, sorry, can I just bust in really quick because this reminded me of something that I really wanted to mention that I like actually hated about this movie.
Okay.
Like the scene at the beginning where like all the babies are flying around,
more
like
bad CGI.
That was like that was horrifying. Like I like, and you're a dad too, and so I don't know if you felt this also, but like just the idea that we're gonna use like the peril of like 20 newborns as like a joke for us to do like these fun like visual speed gags, like that turned me off so much. I like viscerally hated that moment in this movie.
It felt like someone said, we need to have him rescue someone, and it's got to be one of the most heroic, impossible, like, can't believe you got this done. Like, and when it's all over, can you believe he did X, Y, and Z? And you know, was it save a cat? No. Was it save a person? No. What about 10 people? Maybe. What about 10 babies? Oh.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like they just kept dialing it up till they thought, okay, this is the ultimate. And I totally get what you're saying. There's a lot of things as a dad. I view things differently as a dad than, you know, previously being a father. This one, it bothered the CGI and his being annoying bothered me more than the baby falling from the sky. Because you knew, maybe here's the annoying thing about the babies is like, they're not going to kill a baby. They're just
obviously not.
Like,
no,
there was no, like, a human being, maybe, like an adult person, like, where maybe he had to learn a horrible lesson and the woman died. But there's no way. So now it was just kind of a joke. Like, all right, well, let's see how he does it, you know. And
right. Yeah.
But here's the thing. At the end of the story, he definitely has changed. He was less annoying. He matured. He accepted that there's some things you cannot change. However, he kind of didn't learn that lesson, because what happens is he accepts the fact, I cannot change time to save my mother.
Right.
And in putting things right, he's like, oh, but wait a second. I could change some things to save my dad. And he does.
Right. Yes.
And you think, wait a second. What lesson did you learn?
Yeah.
Now, I will say, and I did like this part of the film, is so he messes with, you know, the past in order to save his father. So it's like he learned a lesson, but then he's like, but I still want to save my dad, right? And so he does this thing and it works. He saves his dad. You're like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Apparently some things you can change.
Well, and I think the story... Oh, sorry, go ahead. You finish your thing and then I'll...
I was just going to say, it did affect present day, because Batman is no longer Ben Affleck, it's George Clooney, which I thought was great. I'm like, all right, great ending.
That was fun too.
I'll take this.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun too. I think, you know, the story logic that he's supposed to be, you know, operating under is like, well, I'm not actually changing the past. I'm just changing the present. But then it's the same, like as Michael Keaton Batman taught us, like it doesn't only flow one way. Like you can have the effect, you know, before the cause, and it can ripple out in all kinds of different directions. And so we'll see. So yeah, I don't know. I
have a question for you.
Go for it.
Did you stay for the end credit scene?
Yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't, because it was super pointless.
I was when the credits came on, I Googled, is there a scene, and the thing that it said was, it was Aquaman. It was like, it was interesting, it was cool, but pointless, I think is what it said. So I'm like, great, I'm leaving. So what happened? What was it?
He's literally just having a conversation with Aquaman. Like they come out of a bar, they'd been drinking, and like Aquaman is drunk, and like he's talking about something about Batman, and then Aquaman like falls over into a puddle and just like is there, and he's cool, like lying face down in a puddle because he's Aquaman, and pretty much that's the whole thing. Yeah, it was super pointless, and felt like it was very much a waste of my time.
Well, I'm glad I left when I did.
Yeah, good for you.
All right. Yay me.
Yay. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We've been at this for almost an hour now, so let's go ahead and start to pull this together.
Sure.
And the way that we like to always end our show is with a piece of guaranteed good news.
Okay.
And you have something for us on this.
Yeah. So a friend of mine who his name is Matt Herndon. He's a pastor in St. Louis. He texts me sends me text messages on a regular basis asking, what's a movie clip you can send me where such and such happens, and he uses it in his sermon, and so the funny thing is, I don't know that he's ever used any of my suggestions, but he continues to ask.
That's a good friend.
That's a good friend, right? But so this is a sad note, but then a happy note. So they have 3 children. Their oldest son came down with a disease that affected his ability to walk and to hear and just to function. And it was just like becoming debilitating, where, he was losing his hearing. He was in a wheelchair, and things were just getting worse. And as it turned out, like, they couldn't diagnose it. It was such a rare disease. They've now actually named this disease after my friend's son, and it's called the Mitchell syndrome. And so, unfortunately, Mitchell passed away a couple years ago. He was 19, really neat kid. But in doing this, they have discovered other families with kids who have this same disease. And so my friend Matt and his wife started a foundation to raise money to continue research, because the problem is, it's almost easier to raise money for things like cancer because it's well known and almost everyone knows someone who's been affected by cancer, where this disease is so rare. It's just hard to raise money. And so they're raising money. You can read all about this at mitchellandfriends.org. He was highlighted on NBC News when he was in college before he died, and it's a neat video. And and they're highlighting other families that the neat thing is, like, these families were just in pockets around the country dealing with our child is suffering and sick, and we don't know why, and no one can diagnose this. Well, now they have a diagnosis. There's possibilities of treatments in the future. There's, and so, like, there's, at least they're not alone anymore, and there's potential for hope. And so, anyway, if you like that sort of thing, you can donate to it. They're trying to raise money for research. They have a specific goal. Again, mitchellandfriends.org.
Wow, that's a little bit more bittersweet than we usually get, but I like it. That's super cool.
Well,
we'll definitely have a link. We'll have a link to that site in the show notes, and I'm definitely gonna look and find out a little bit more about that at least, because that's a.
I mean, it really, and I understand your comment about being bittersweet, because, but for people who are going through this, it really is a godsend, that
absolutely,
they have a community, and that research is being done and money is being raised, and so it's taking something that is obviously tragic and sad, but making something good from it for others who need it. So, yeah,
that's great. All right, cool. Well, listen, Josh, this was so fun. Thank you so much for coming on and I'm looking forward to hearing what you and your other friend talk about on the movie proposal. If you're somehow listening to our show and you're not already also subscribed to the Holy Post and the movie proposal, then you need to reevaluate your life choices and go and do those immediately. Put that into your podcast feed because they're great. And again, I'll just mention here, please, for all you listeners, please engage, share. I need to see likes and reviews on iTunes, because that really does help us get in front of more people. We do have an active Patreon account for the show at this point. There's a puzzle encoded into the Patreon page, and if you can tell me what super geeky thing is being referenced there, then that'll get you access to the Patreon benefits. And the first 4 people who support on Patreon will have the chance to be part of a one-shot D&D game that I will run and that we will publish on the show as a real play episode. So please get in touch with me, and if you have good news that you'd like for me to share on the show, I'd love to hear about it. You can email me at 2geeksoup@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at 2geeksoup. And even though it probably means that I am the ill-prepared substitute teacher, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.
All the shines will turn to rust.